I still wake up some nights thinking about the photograph I found hidden in my sister's bedroom wall. It was tucked behind a loose piece of wallpaper, yellowed and creased from years of being hidden away. In it, my sister Rachel stood in our childhood backyard, but her face had been methodically scratched out with a black pen, over and over, until the paper had worn thin. At the bottom, in my own handwriting from when I was maybe 8 years old, were the words, "I hate her, I hate her, I hate her," repeated in crayon until they bled off the page. And if you think that's bad, you won't believe what happened next. My name is Sarah, and I'm 23 years old. For most of my life, I believed I was the problem child in our family. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, was everything our parents wanted in a daughter. She was valedictorian at Westfield High, captain of the debate team, and got a full scholarship to Northwestern University for pre-law. Me? I barely scraped by with C's and spent most of my time in the school's tiny photography darkroom, developing pictures that nobody cared to see. Growing up in our colonial house on Maple Street in suburban Illinois, the dynamic was always clear. Rachel got the bigger bedroom with the bay window overlooking the garden. I got the small room next to the water heater that made strange clicking sounds all night. When Rachel brought home her report cards, Mom would tape them to the refrigerator with little heart magnets. When I brought home mine, Dad would just sigh and ask if I'd considered community college. The favoritism wasn't subtle. During Rachel's high school graduation, our parents threw a backyard party with catered food and invited the entire neighborhood. When I graduated 2 years later, we went to Applebee's. Just the three of us, because Rachel was too busy with her internship at a downtown law firm to attend. The night I told them I wanted to pursue photography professionally was burned into my memory like one of my darkroom prints. We were sitting in our formal dining room, the one Mom only used for special occasions, and I'd spent weeks building up the courage. I'd even put together a portfolio of my best work, black and white street photography, portraits of the elderly at the local nursing home, landscapes from our family trips up north. Photography? Mom repeated, as if I'd said I wanted to become a professional unicorn trainer. Sarah, honey, that's a lovely hobby, but you need to think about your future. Dad didn't even look up from his pot roast. Your sister's already making connections at the firm. Maybe she could get you a position as a paralegal. I tried to explain that this wasn't just a hobby for me. I'd won 3rd place in the state high school photography competition. I'd been accepted to the Art Institute of Chicago. But their eyes had already glazed over. The conversation shifted to Rachel's latest accomplishment, something about winning a mock trial competition, and I might as well have been invisible. That's when I knew I had to leave. The Art Institute was expensive, and my parents made it clear they wouldn't be contributing to what they called my artistic phase. I took out student loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and barely slept for 4 years. But I graduated with a degree in photography and a minor in digital media, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of something I'd accomplished. Rachel, meanwhile, had sailed through Northwestern and landed a position at Hartwell, Blackstone and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. She moved into a luxury apartment in Lincoln Park that our parents helped her furnish. I moved into a studio apartment above a Korean restaurant in Wicker Park, where the smell of kimchi seeped through the floorboards and the radiator only worked when it felt like it. For 3 years after college, I freelanced. I photographed weddings on weekends, did headshots for aspiring actors, and slowly built a portfolio that I was genuinely proud of. It wasn't glamorous, and there were weeks when I lived on ramen noodles and hope, but I was doing what I loved. The family dinners during this period were torture. Every Sunday, we'd gather at my parents' house, and the conversation always followed the same script. Mom would gush about Rachel's latest case, her new designer handbag, or her relationship with Marcus, a fellow lawyer from a prominent Chicago family. When asked about my week, I'd mention a photography job, and Dad would nod politely before asking Rachel about her bonus. I remember one particularly painful Sunday in October. I just finished a photography series documenting the last residents of a building scheduled for demolition. The Chicago Tribune had published 3 of my photos in their Sunday edition with a full credit line. I was so excited to share the news, but when I brought it up, Mom glanced at the newspaper for exactly 3 seconds before setting it aside. That's nice, dear, she said. Rachel, tell us about your vacation plans with Marcus. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and cried silently into a hand towel that still smelled like the lavender detergent Mom had used since I was a child. The breaking point came last spring. I'd been commissioned to photograph a high-profile wedding, the daughter of a Chicago alderman marrying into old money. It was the kind of job that could launch my career to the next level. The photos turned out beautifully, and the bride's family was so impressed they recommended me to several other wealthy families. Suddenly, I had a waiting list of clients and could finally breathe financially. I was excited to share this news at our usual Sunday dinner. For once, I had something that might actually impress my parents. But when I arrived at the house, the atmosphere was different. Mom was bustling around the kitchen with unusual energy, and Dad was opening a bottle of champagne, the good stuff they usually saved for major holidays. What's the celebration? I asked, setting down the apple pie I'd picked up from the bakery. Oh, Sarah. Mom practically squealed. Wait until you hear Rachel's news. My sister appeared from the living room, practically glowing. She was wearing a new dress, something that probably cost more than my rent, and had that smile she'd perfected for client meetings. I made partner, she announced. I'm the youngest partner in the firm's history. The next hour was a blur of congratulations, phone calls to relatives, and plans for a celebration party. My wedding photography success suddenly felt insignificant in comparison. When there was finally a lull in the conversation, I mentioned my recent success, but it was like throwing a pebble into an ocean. The waves of excitement over Rachel's promotion swallowed it completely. That's wonderful, honey, Dad said absently, refilling Rachel's champagne glass. Maybe you could photograph her celebration party. Something inside me snapped. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. You know what? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm tired of this. The room went quiet. Mom looked genuinely confused. Tired of what, sweetheart? I'm tired of being treated like the consolation prize in this family. I'm tired of my accomplishments being brushed off while Rachel's are celebrated like national holidays. I'm tired of feeling like I don't matter. Rachel looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Mom started to protest, but I cut her off. I've been building a successful career doing something I love, something I'm actually good at, and you act like it's a phase I'll grow out of. Meanwhile, Rachel becomes a partner, and you're ready to throw a parade. Sarah, you're being dramatic, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? When was the last time you asked to see my work? When was the last time you seemed genuinely interested in my life? When was the last time you introduced me to someone without mentioning what Rachel does for a living? The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the dining room, at the china cabinet filled with dishes we only used for special occasions, at the family photos on the mantel where Rachel's graduation pictures outnumbered mine 3-1, at the faces of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally but somehow never figured out how to show it. I need some space, I said finally. From all of this. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Mom starting to cry and Dad mumbling something about me being too sensitive. Rachel called my name once, but she didn't follow me. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of minimal contact, of declined dinner invitations, of short, polite text messages instead of real conversations. I threw myself into my work, and it paid off. I signed with a gallery in River North to display my documentary photography series. I booked 3 high-end weddings for next spring. I even started dating someone, James, a graphic designer I met at a coffee shop who actually asks to see my photos and listens when I talk about composition and lighting. I thought I was healing. I thought I was finally building a life where I mattered, where my voice was heard, where my accomplishments weren't constantly measured against someone else's. Then, 3 weeks ago, Mom called me. Not texted, called. She never called unless someone was dead or getting married. Sarah? Her voice sounded strange, strained. Can we meet for coffee? There's something I need to tell you. We met at a small cafe in Evanston, neutral territory. Mom looked like she'd aged years in the 6 months since I'd seen her. Her usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and she was wearing jeans, something I'd rarely seen outside of gardening. "I owe you an apology," she began, stirring sugar into her coffee with shaking hands. "Your father and we haven't been fair to you. We know that now." I waited. After years of being dismissed, I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "Something's happened with Rachel," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Something terrible." My first instinct was concern. Whatever our complicated relationship, Rachel was still my sister. "Is she okay? Is she hurt?" Mom's laugh was bitter, hollow. "She's fine. Physically. But Sarah, she's been lying to us. About everything." The story that unfolded over the next hour was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Rachel hadn't just made partner, she'd been embezzling from client accounts to fund her lifestyle. The luxury apartment, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners with Marcus, all of it paid for with money stolen from the firm's trust accounts. The FBI raided her apartment last Tuesday, Mom said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's been arrested. The firm is pressing charges, and there are going to be civil lawsuits. She could go to prison, Sarah. Our golden child could go to prison." I felt like I was underwater, hearing everything through a thick, distorting filter. The sister who could do no wrong, who had been held up as the example I should aspire to, was a criminal. "How long?" I asked. "How long was she stealing?" "They think at least 3 years. Maybe longer." Mom's voice broke. "The partners said they trusted her because she was so charming, so convincing. She had clients specifically requesting to work with her because she seemed so honest and professional." 3 years. That meant she'd been stealing money while lecturing me about financial responsibility. She'd been committing felonies while our parents praised her integrity. "There's more," Mom said, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "We had to mortgage the house to pay for her legal defense. Your father's retirement fund is gone. We've lost almost everything trying to keep her out of prison." The irony was suffocating. My parents, who had spent years telling me to be more like Rachel, had bankrupted themselves trying to save her from the consequences of her own actions. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Mom's grip on my hand tightened. "Because we need you. Rachel won't talk to us. She blames us for not supporting her enough, for putting too much pressure on her. She says if we hadn't expected her to be perfect all the time, she wouldn't have felt like she needed to maintain an image she couldn't afford." The victim complex was staggering. Even facing federal charges, Rachel was making it everyone else's fault. "She's cut us off completely," Mom continued. "Changed her phone number, won't return our calls. Her lawyer says she's planning to move to another state when this is all over, start fresh somewhere else." I pulled my hand away. "And you want me to what? Talk to her? Convince her to come home?" "I want you to forgive us," Mom said simply. "I want you to know that we see now how wrong we were. We were so focused on Rachel's achievements that we couldn't see yours. We were so proud of her success that we didn't notice she was falling apart inside." I stared at this woman who had raised me, who had shaped so much of my self-doubt and insecurity, and I felt empty. Not angry, not vindicated, just hollow. "The thing is, Mom," I said slowly, "I don't think Rachel was falling apart. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. I think she liked the lifestyle and the praise, and when she couldn't earn it legitimately, she found another way." Mom flinched as if I'd slapped her. "You want to know the difference between Rachel and me?" I continued. "When I couldn't afford the life I wanted, I worked 3 jobs and ate ramen for dinner. When Rachel couldn't afford the life she wanted, she stole from her clients. That's not pressure, that's character." The cafe around us buzzed with normal conversations, normal problems. Students typing on laptops, business people checking emails, couples sharing pastries. It felt surreal to be discussing my family's implosion over lattes and jazz music. "I need time," I finally said. I need to process all of this. Mom nodded, tears still flowing. Of course. But Sarah? I meant what I said about the apology. We failed you as parents, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I left her sitting in that cafe, crying into her coffee cup, and I felt like I was walking through someone else's life. The weeks that followed were a blur of revelations. The local news picked up the story: young partner at prestigious law firm charged with embezzlement. They used Rachel's professional headshot, the one where she's smiling confidently in her navy blazer, looking every inch the successful attorney. The comments on the news website were brutal. Former clients talked about how much they'd trusted her, how betrayed they felt. I found myself obsessively reading every article, watching every news segment. This was my sister, the person I'd grown up with, the person who used to help me with my math homework and taught me how to braid my hair. Now she was a criminal, a cautionary tale, a news story that people would forget in a few weeks. James tried to be supportive, but how do you explain this level of family dysfunction to someone who grew up in a normal household? His parents had always treated him and his siblings equally, celebrated everyone's achievements, supported everyone's dreams. He couldn't understand how a family could be so fundamentally broken. Maybe this is good, he said one night as we lay in bed, my laptop open to yet another news article about Rachel's case. Maybe now your parents will appreciate what they have in you. But that was the problem. I didn't want their appreciation now, when it was motivated by desperation and regret. I didn't want to be the consolation prize daughter, the backup plan when the golden child self-destructed. Dad called a few days later. His voice sounded old, defeated. Sarah, I know you need space, and I respect that. But I wanted you to know that we're proud of you. We've always been proud of you. We just didn't know how to show it. Why? I asked. Why was it so hard to show pride in me when it was so easy with Rachel? The silence stretched between us, filled with 23 years of missed opportunities and misplaced priorities. I don't know, he admitted finally. I think we thought love meant pushing you to be better. We thought if we praised you too much, you'd get complacent. But with Rachel, everything came so easily. We thought she needed the praise to stay motivated. So you gave her all the encouragement and gave me all the criticism? We were wrong, he said simply. We were so wrong. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, my small, kimchi-scented apartment that I'd furnished with secondhand finds and my own photography, and I realized something. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their regret or their newfound appreciation. I had already proven to myself that I was worth something, that I could build a life I was proud of, that I could succeed without their validation. But I also realized that the little girl inside me, the one who had scratched out Rachel's face in that photograph and written, "I hate her," over and over again, that little girl needed to let go of the anger. Not for them, but for me. The gallery opening for my documentary series was last Saturday night. I'd spent months preparing for it, selecting the perfect prints, writing artist statements, preparing for the most important night of my career so far. James helped me hang the photographs, and as we worked, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. The opening was everything I'd hoped for. People genuinely connected with my work, asked thoughtful questions about my process, and several pieces sold before the evening was over. The gallery owner introduced me as one of the most promising documentary photographers in the city, and for once, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Halfway through the evening, I saw them. Mom and Dad, standing near the entrance, looking uncertain and out of place among the art crowd. They'd dressed up, Dad in his good suit, Mom in the dress she usually wore to church, and they looked nervous. I could have ignored them. I could have pretended I didn't see them and continued enjoying my night. Instead, I walked over. "You came," I said. Mom's eyes were already teary. "We couldn't miss this. We should have been supporting you all along." Dad gestured toward my photographs hanging on the white gallery walls. "These are incredible, Sarah. I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were talented, but seeing them displayed like this." "Thank you," I said simply. We stood there for a moment, three people who had spent decades not knowing how to talk to each other, surrounded by images I'd captured of other people's lives, other people's stories. "Have you heard from Rachel?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "Her lawyer says she's planning to take a plea deal. She'll probably get 2 to 3 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior." 2 to 3 years. Rachel would be 29 when she got out, her law career over, her reputation destroyed. She'd have to rebuild her entire life from scratch. "I feel sorry for her," I said, and I meant it. "I think she got so caught up in being perfect that she forgot how to be real." Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking. About everything. About how we raised you girls, about the mistakes we made. We want to do better, if you'll let us." I looked at these two people who had shaped so much of my pain and insecurity, who had made me feel invisible and inadequate for most of my life. They looked older, sadder, humbled by the spectacular collapse of their pride and joy. "I'm willing to try," I said. "But things are going to be different. I'm not going to pretend that the past didn't happen, and I'm not going to be grateful for attention that only came after everything fell apart." Mom nodded eagerly. "Of course. Whatever you need. We want to be part of your life. We want to know who you really are." James appeared at my side, sliding his arm around my waist. I introduced him to my parents, and I watched as Dad shook his hand and Mom asked him about his work. For the first time in my memory, they seemed genuinely interested in someone connected to my life. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. My parents stayed for another hour, looking at every single photograph, reading every artist statement, asking questions about my technique and inspiration. When they left, Mom hugged me, really hugged me, not the perfunctory embraces we'd exchanged at family gatherings. "I'm proud of you," she whispered in my ear. "I should have told you that a long time ago." After they left, James and I cleaned up the gallery space. As I carefully wrapped each unsold print, I thought about the photograph I'd found in Rachel's wall all those years ago. The one where I'd scratched out her face and written about hating her. I didn't hate her anymore. I felt sorry for her, trapped by expectations and image management until she lost sight of who she really was. I felt sorry for my parents, who'd been so focused on achievement that they'd forgotten about character. But mostly, I felt proud of myself for becoming someone I actually liked, someone who could create beauty and capture truth, someone who could build a life worth living. The criminal trial is set for next month. Rachel's lawyer thinks she'll take the plea deal, serve her time, and disappear somewhere far from Chicago. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe she needs to start over completely, figure out who she is when she's not performing the role of the perfect daughter. As for me, I have another gallery show scheduled for next spring. I'm working on a new series about family dynamics and the stories we tell ourselves about belonging. Some of the photos are beautiful, some are heartbreaking, and all of them are true. My parents and I are still figuring things out. They come to my photography events now, ask about my projects, and seem genuinely interested in my life. It's awkward sometimes, all of us learning how to relate to each other differently, but it's honest in a way our family never was before. Last week, Mom brought me a box of my childhood things she'd found while cleaning out the attic. In it was that old photograph I'd hidden in Rachel's wall, the one where I'd scratched out her face. But there was something else too, dozens of my childhood drawings and school photos, report cards, and art projects that I thought they'd thrown away years ago. "I kept everything," Mom said quietly. "I know it doesn't make up for how we acted, but I want you to know that we treasured these things. We just didn't know how to show it." I looked through the box of memories, at evidence of a childhood where I was seen and valued, even if I didn't feel it at the time. Maybe love had been there all along, just buried under expectations and comparisons and the daily dysfunction of a family that didn't know how to communicate. I don't know if Rachel will ever understand what her choices cost all of us. I don't know if she'll take responsibility or continue to blame everyone else for the pressure she felt. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again, or if she'll disappear into whatever new life she builds for herself. But I know that I'm finally free from the need to compete with her, to measure myself against her achievements, to feel like a disappointment in comparison. I've built something real, something that belongs to me, something that no one can take away or diminish. Sometimes the truth is more disturbing than any fiction. Sometimes the golden child turns out to be fool's gold, and the family disappointment turns out to be the only one with any integrity. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally forget how to show it until it's almost too late. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months after my gallery opening, when I thought we were finally healing as a family, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about Rachel, about my parents, and about my own childhood. It started with a phone call from Detective Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. She asked if I could come in to answer some questions about my sister's case. I assumed it was routine, maybe they needed character references or family history for the sentencing hearing. The police station smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Detective Martinez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much. She led me to a small interview room with fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly yellow. "Miss Patterson," she began, using my family name, "we've been investigating your sister's activities, and some concerning information has come to light. Information that extends beyond the embezzlement charges." My stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" She opened a thick file folder and pulled out several photographs. They were surveillance photos, grainy black and white images that looked like they'd been taken from a distance. In them, I could see Rachel meeting with various people in parking lots, coffee shops, and what looked like hotel lobbies. "We believe your sister was involved in more than financial crimes," Detective Martinez said carefully. "We think she was selling confidential client information to third parties. Divorce settlements, business acquisitions, personal details that could be used for blackmail or insider trading." The room felt like it was tilting. That's impossible. Rachel might be a thief, but she's not she wouldn't. "Miss Patterson, we have recorded phone conversations. We have financial records showing payments from shell companies. Your sister wasn't just stealing money, she was selling secrets." Detective Martinez slid a transcript across the table. It was a phone conversation between Rachel and someone identified as Subject B. As I read Rachel's words, my blood turned to ice. "The Johnson divorce is going to be messy," Rachel's voice was quoted as saying. "He's hiding assets in the Cayman account I told you about. If you short his company stock before the announcement, you could make a fortune." "How much are we talking?" Subject B asked. "At least $2 million in profit if you time it right. My cut is 20%, same as always." I stared at the transcript, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was systematic betrayal of every client who had trusted her. "There's more," Detective Martinez said gently. "We found evidence that she's been doing this for at least 4 years, which overlaps significantly with the embezzlement timeline. She had a whole network of contacts, investment brokers, private investigators, even reporters who paid for information about high-profile cases. 4 years. That meant she'd been living this double life since shortly after she started at the law firm. Everything I thought I knew about my sister's rapid success was built on lies and criminal activity. But that's not why I called you in today," Detective Martinez continued. "We found something else in your sister's apartment when we executed the search warrant. Something that concerns you directly." She pulled out an evidence bag containing a manila folder. Through the clear plastic, I could see my name written on the tab in Rachel's handwriting. "She's been investigating you," Detective Martinez said. "We found extensive files on your personal life, your finances, your relationships, your career. Photos of you taken without your knowledge, copies of your tax returns, even medical records." My hands started shaking. What was she planning to do with that information? "We're not sure yet. But Miss Chen, some of these photos were taken inside your apartment. We think she may have had access to your home." The world seemed to collapse around me. I thought about all the times I'd felt like someone had been in my apartment when I was away. Little things, items moved slightly, my camera equipment arranged differently than I'd left it, the feeling that someone had been going through my things. "She had a key?" I asked weakly. That's what we need to determine. Do you remember ever giving your sister access to your apartment? Or leaving your keys where she could have made copies? I thought back over the years. Rachel had visited my apartment exactly twice, both times acting like she was doing me a favor by spending time in my quaint little space. But there had been that time last Christmas when she'd offered to water my plants while I was visiting James's family out of state. I'd given her my spare key and assumed she'd returned it, but now I couldn't remember specifically getting it back. She watered my plants last December, I said numbly. I gave her my spare key. Detective Martinez made a note. We'll need to have your locks changed immediately. And Miss Chen, there's something else. We found evidence that your sister was planning to frame you for some of her crimes. The fluorescent light seemed to buzz louder. Frame me? For what? We found forged documents with your signature, fake email accounts set up in your name, and what appears to be a plan to make it look like you were her accomplice in the information-selling scheme. She had detailed notes about your financial struggles, your student loans, your need for money to fund your photography career. I felt like I was going to be sick. She was going to blame me? It looks like she was building a case to claim that you pressured her into criminal activity to help support your art career. She had documented conversations where she claims you asked her for money, times when you supposedly expressed resentment about her success. But that's not. I never asked her for anything. I worked 3 jobs to avoid asking my family for help. We believe you, Detective Martinez said. But she was very thorough in creating false evidence. If her plan had worked, you would have been facing federal charges alongside her. I sat in that sterile room, trying to process the fact that my own sister, the person I'd grown up with, shared a childhood with, someone I'd felt sorry for just months earlier, had been planning to destroy my life to save her own. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What happens now? We need you to be aware of the situation for your own safety. We also need you to go through your personal belongings and see if anything is missing or if you notice anything that shouldn't be there. Your sister had detailed information about your daily routines, your work schedule, even your relationship with Mr. Morrison. James. She'd been watching James too. Is he in danger? We don't think so, but we want both of you to be cautious. Your sister is currently out on bail, and while she's not supposed to contact you, we can't be certain she won't try. The drive home from the police station was a blur. I called James from my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial his number. Sarah? What's wrong? You sound terrible. I tried to explain what I'd learned, but the words came out in fragments. James met me at my apartment building, and together we went through every room, looking for signs that Rachel had been there, for hidden cameras or recording devices, for anything that didn't belong. In my bedroom closet, behind a box of old college textbooks, we found a small recording device. It was sophisticated, expensive looking, and had been running for months based on the data storage. She's been listening to us, I whispered, staring at the tiny device in James's palm. She's been listening to our private conversations, our everything. James was furious in a way I'd never seen before. He wanted to call the police immediately, but I asked him to wait. I needed time to think, to process the magnitude of what Rachel had done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the conversations I'd had in that apartment over the past year. Intimate moments with James, phone calls with my therapist, discussions about my family that I'd thought were private. Rachel had heard all of it. But worse than the violation of privacy was the realization of what she'd been planning. She was prepared to destroy my life, to send me to prison, to ruin everything I'd worked for, just to save herself from the consequences of her own choices. The next morning, my parents called. They'd been contacted by the police about the new evidence. Sarah, we're so sorry, Mom sobbed into the phone. We had no idea she was capable of something like this. We never thought. How could you not know? I asked, surprised by the anger in my own voice. How could you live with someone for 26 years and not see who she really was? Dad got on the line. We saw what we wanted to see. We saw our successful daughter, our pride and joy. We didn't want to look deeper. But the signs must have been there. This level of manipulation doesn't develop overnight. There was a long pause. Finally, Mom spoke again, her voice barely audible. There were things, she admitted. When you girls were young, there were incidents. Rachel would blame you for things she'd done, and we always believed her because she was so convincing. There were times when your toys would go missing and turn up broken in your room, but Rachel would swear she hadn't touched them. I remembered those incidents. I remembered being punished for things I hadn't done, for breaking toys that had mysteriously appeared damaged in my space. I'd thought it was just typical sibling rivalry, but now I wondered if it was something darker. She was always so good at making people believe her, Dad added. Even as a child, she could spin a story that sounded completely reasonable. We thought it was a gift, the way she could communicate and persuade people. You thought manipulation was a gift? I asked incredulously. We didn't see it as manipulation then, Mom said defensively. We saw it as intelligence, as social skills. We were proud of her ability to get people to like her and trust her. The conversation left me feeling more disturbed than before. My parents hadn't just failed to see Rachel's true nature, they'd encouraged it, praised it, held it up as something to aspire to. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged about Rachel's criminal enterprise. The FBI had uncovered a sophisticated network of information brokers, and Rachel was apparently one of their most valuable sources. She betrayed dozens of clients, destroyed multiple lives, and made hundreds of thousands of dollars selling secrets. The media attention intensified. Our family name was in the headlines daily, and reporters started showing up at my apartment building and my parents' house. I had to hire a lawyer to help me navigate the legal implications of being Rachel's sister, even though I was a victim rather than an accomplice. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early December. Rachel's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal that would implicate me as a co-conspirator, but the evidence was clear that I'd been a target, not a partner. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom with James and my parents. When Rachel was brought in, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her usually perfect hair was lank and greasy, and she wore an orange jumpsuit that made her look small and defeated. But when she saw me in the courtroom, her expression changed. For just a moment, I saw a flash of the old Rachel, calculating, manipulative, angry. She stared at me with such hatred that I actually felt afraid. During the hearing, the prosecutor outlined the evidence against her. The recordings, the forged documents, the plan to frame me, all of it laid out in clinical detail. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been under psychological pressure, that the family dynamics had driven her to desperation, but the judge wasn't buying it. Miss Patterson, the judge said, looking directly at Rachel, you've not only betrayed your clients and violated your oath as an attorney, but you've attempted to frame your own sister for your crimes. This court finds the evidence of premeditation and malicious intent to be overwhelming. Rachel was denied bail and remanded to custody pending trial. As they led her away, she turned back one more time, and the look she gave me was pure venom. In that moment, I realized that whatever sister I thought I'd had, whatever relationship I'd imagined we could rebuild, was completely gone. This story was completely true, except for all the parts that weren't. Thanks for listening. That's how it happened, or didn't. But if it did, don't think it couldn't happen to you. Subscribe to It Happened to Me, a new story drops daily.